Hello everyone, hello my friends. Welcome to a new video. Today I would like to show you one of my games that I played over here in the 11th London Chess Classic in the year 2019 in December. So it was about 3 years and 2 months ago. This is how the game went. I was playing black and my opponent was white. I gave him the honorable GM title. He's not a GM in real life, but he's a good player, so I gave him that out of respect. Um, so it's how the game went. He started off with d4, normal move, nothing too special, and I went c6, which is a stalling move in my opinion. Is to wait. I'm not committing to anything yet. I want to wait to see what opening he decides to play. He went e4, and now you may be thinking, why don't you go for a Caro-Kann? You could do that, but instead I went d6. Once again, waiting. At the same time, opening up my light square bishop. f4. So he's getting all aggressive now with a free pawn center, and he has the right to do that. I went g6. So as soon as I've gone g6, I've already committed myself to a setup. The setup would be to play the bishop to there, attack this square, my knight there, maybe put this knight there, maybe put the bishop there, and uh, uh, pin any knight that comes to f3 or e2. Uh, Castle the king, move the queen over to this diagonal somehow, one of these squares, etc., etc. I've As soon as I play g6, I've already committed my setup, and he went knight to c3. I think as soon as he went f4, he committed his setup, but knight c3, bishop g7, following with my setup, knight f3, bishop g4. So the bishop now over here, sorry, my arrow skills are terrible today. Bishop pins the knight to the queen, so the knight can't move. So he keeps on developing a piece, bishop e3, queen b6. Slightly critical move since it attacks this and this at the same time. Also, there's a pin over here, so he can't move his pawn up since I just chop his bishop. He goes rook b1 anyway uh, to defend the pawn. He could also go b3, but it's understandable why he did do this. It's because this diagonal would suddenly be weakened since the knight isn't protected anymore. I would probably still like develop normally with knight d7, bishop takes knight to f6, and maybe c5, but he didn't want any weaknesses, so he went rook b1. In fact, what does the engine say here? The engine says he doesn't even need to protect the pawn. The engine says queen d2. Let's say, for instance, if I were to take the pawn, what does the engine say now? I haven't really analyzed this in depth, so we'd have to see. Rook b1, queen a3 is forced. Rook takes b7. Makes sense, right? The reason the engine gives white a massive advantage is because black's pieces are lacking in development. White has a more active setup, etc., etc. I forgot to put on the eval bar, by the way. Now it's over here. For those of you who are newer to chess, the eval bar, the evaluation bar, which is on this side of the screen on the left, indicates who's winning, who's losing, etc. in terms of points. Anyway, queen d2 did not happen in the game. He had rook b1, the safest move on the board, I think. Then knight to d7, bishop to e2. Finally, he escapes his pin, so I decided to go kamikaze and take the knight. Because I figured out that this bishop, right now at the moment, is it an asset or a liability? And the answer is clearly it's a liability. It doesn't do anything where it applies a little bit of pressure, but he just plays h3, and my bishop is forced to take. I took anyway, and then e5. You may be wondering, why didn't I wait? I can wait for him to play h3, then I take. And in doing that, he's wasted a move playing h3. You could argue and make a case for that. However, let me turn off the engine. However, the problem with that is I'm giving him a clear idea to attack. And in the game, I got scared of that. So, in order to not give him any indication to play h3 and g4, I immediately chopped the knight and then went e5, applying pressure to his center. The thing is, it looks like he is starting to overextend with these pawns. And the problem with overextension is that it leads to weaknesses falling behind the pawns. So that's what e5 aimed to exploit. Also, I'm simply threatening to win the pawn on d4 right now with these 3 pieces attacking it versus the 2 pieces defending it. So he castled, completely ignoring my capture. Well, I could definitely take it, you know. I could take, but there was a problem here. Let's see what the engine actually says. It says he simply goes knight a4. There we go. Knight a4 is enough for him to defend. Because he takes this, attacks that. For example, queen a5. The engine suggests queen a5. Then perhaps this move, attacking this. Oops, sorry, attacking that. So I don't have time to take the knight. I would need to block. And then seriously, I lag behind in development. But anyway, that's why I went knight e7 in the game. I decided to maintain the tension, and he went knight to e2 to defend the pawn. Maybe it's a little bit passive, but I'm about to castle, so he won't get an attack in the center anymore. So he would rather protect it rather than open the center. So in this position, played f5, which is an outlandish move. Remember, back in this time, I was still in 1800, like a lower 1800, so I didn't know what to do. f5, aggressive. Now the thing is about this move, the idea is to undermine his center once again, to overextend his center. However, in playing f5, I was being a little bit hypocritical in overextending my own center. So the best move for me would have literally just been to castle. But I was scared of him playing stuff like knight g3, f5, queen d2, bishop h6. I know it's very, very far down along the line, but I was scared of everything back then. So f5. He went bishop to f2, which also shows a little bit of cowardice. But the idea is the bishop right now is not protected. So a move such as d takes e5 would succumb to queen takes e3. However, now after bishop to f2, which is what he played, the bishop is protected by 2 different pieces. So he is threatening to take this and attack my queen at the same time, and my queen can't take the bishop. So it's logical in that sense. However, I still think he should have opened up the center more. The engine says queen d2, to be fair, or bishop f2. In fact, the engine doesn't really rate his move too badly. If I let it think for a little bit, yeah, it puts my opponent's move as second or third best move. Not too bad. Not too bad, bro. He went bishop to f2, and I went queen c7, acknowledging this attack, and then takes d5. I think d5 was his mistake. Before, in fact, f takes e5 was probably his mistake, because it gives away a significant proportion of his advantage. Since after I take back here, there was perhaps danger for me in the center. Maybe he should take on f5 instead. The engine would actually suggest him to take on f5. I was correct. Then I would take then g4 is what the engine says, knight h6, and it's terrifying for me. Queen d3, maybe take. My king is still uncastled, and he'll probably do everything in his power to make castling harder for me. But he took this way. It's a little bit different because now the f file isn't really the files are not really opened. Whereas he takes f5. Now he can take here and the f file opens. Whereas what happened in the game was the files stayed closed. Yes, he could technically swap off 2 times, but then he made the fatal, not fatal, but still quite bad mistake, d5. The reason this gives away his advantage completely is after I take the pawn and he recaptures, his attack runs out and I have a brilliant center. In fact, it's not too late to lose. His immediate threat actually turns out to be d6, because the queen protects the pawn, obviously, and the pawn on d6 would attack the knight and the queen at the same time. I can only move one away and I lose the other. So I went queen d6, acknowledging the fact that the pawn can't go forward. Knight c3, um, trying to go there, attack the queen, then play d6 and knight c7. His plan is clear. I just stopped it with a6. Simple move. Other than all of this stuff, the other idea of knight c3 is to protect the pawn. However, in my opinion, he could have considered playing c4, which further strengthens the pawn, and then play knight c3 later. Problem is, I have e4 and his bishop is trapped. So knight c3, a6, and bishop to e2. I think bishop to e2 was played out of prophylaxis because he knew I would play e4 and attack his bishop. He would move his bishop now rather than later and reroute it somewhere. I don't know what else the idea of this move is. So I castled, and now officially we can say his attack is dead. Now we must assess the position. The first thing we have to assess is king safety and perhaps potential king safety as well. So at the moment, nobody's king is being attacked at all at the moment, right? Nothing's going on with the kings. But who has more of a potential to attack? This is where the next thing comes in, piece activity. In my opinion, despite me not having a bishop pair, I think my piece activity is much better since I can play e4 with my bishop on e5, exploit this diagonal, bring my knights around, and my other knight perhaps stays back in defense. For him, he can't do the same thing because these two pawns are in the way for him. These two pawns will just move forward or something. One of them will move forward, and he will not be able to exploit any square at all because my pawns just block him. Maybe after e4, the only thing he'll be able to do is exploit this diagonal, but that's pretty useless as well since I can just place my knight there and block it. So my piece activity currently it doesn't matter, but in the long run, if I play correctly, it's better. My piece activity is better. Queen activity. At the moment, both queens are kind of passively, defensively placed. This one is passive because, well, as soon as it moves, the pawn will go forward. It has to stay where it is for now. This queen is passive because as soon as it moves, it gives me a chance to eventually, not now, but eventually take this pawn on d5. So both the queens are tied to the pawn. But my queen, I think, is easier for it to move simply because I have this pawn shelter in front of it. This here. Maybe go e4 later. That's queen activity. I talked about piece activity. I talked about king safety. Now, material is even, apart from bishop versus knight. That's the only difference. It is quite an open position, so maybe bishops would benefit. But in this situation, his bishops don't do well because, once again, these two pawns, they completely block everything for him, whilst giving me space to attack myself with myself, my own plans. Finally, pawn structure. This pawn is a passed pawn, but at the moment it's a weakness because I can keep on attacking it once, twice, 3 times on the pawn. In order to defend it adequately, he would need to move the c pawn to c4, but his knight is there, so he would have to waste a move playing knight 4, playing c4, and playing the knight back. So, pawn structure, I think mine is stronger, even if he has a passed pawn. I also been talking about these two for so long. They, once again, shelter for me and against my opponent. Anyway, bishop c4. It's a move that makes sense. Is to overprotect the pawn and give the bishop something to do. So I went e4 once again. My plan to go there and attack this. a3, bishop e5. Now a3, I think he did this because he anticipated me to play b5 and he would easily be able to retreat there. Fair enough. Bishop e5, attacking this twice and it's defended once, so he went h3. h3, b5, attacking the bishop and back to b3 rather than a2. Well, it doesn't really matter. So then I went knight to f6, which is a logical move. It has two purposes. Number one is obviously to attack this. Now that pawn is being attacked 3 times and defended 3 times. But the main purpose of knight f6 is, look at this, here, here, all there. All of these squares are a weakness. All of that. So, in other words, I was disguising my intentions. I was making him think I was attacking this, but in reality, I wanted to do all this stuff instead. Queen e1. I think he did this in order to provide protection to these 2 squares, so that it's harder for my knight to get in, which it makes sense. He does abandon the protection of this pawn, but the rook is getting there soon. In fact, it's not as easy as you may think. For example, this immediately blunders the game because he simply takes, and rook d1. And now there's a pin here. The knight can't move. Only the queen protects it. The rook and the bishop attack it. The knight is completely dead. So it's not too late to lose once again. So I went king g7 in order to counteract this pin. Maybe it's not the best move, but it doesn't do any harm to my position. It also plugs in any potential other weak squares on this diagonal, like this one in h6. He went g3, which is an ugly move because it weakens this square, and this square, and that square, and that square, all in one go. All of these in one move are weakened. Yes, he does strengthen this, but in fact he gives me a hook to attach myself to. Whenever I play f4, my pawn attacks this, forcing him to make a decision. And I use this later. I went g5 once again, preparing a future f4. f4, which would force him to make a decision. Oops. And then I can go f3 and make a pass pawn or take and break his king. He went rook to d1 in order to protect this pawn so that he doesn't lose it, and then rook a to c8. Simple, it's just an open file, nothing special. Okay, king to g2, defending this, defending that square. It's not a bad move, also it seems. So now in this position, I would love to play f4, because it attacks this, threatens that, threatens that. Problem is, he has this move. That is the only thing stopping me from playing f4. I blunder a pawn straight away. And notice that the eval bar says I am still like a little bit better by 0.8 points, but it wouldn't exactly be comfortable. I'll probably give him this check, or like take here, and he takes, and I take here, and whatever. But the thing is, I would give away most of my advantage if I went f4. So what did I do? Firstly, what was the piece causing the problem again? f4. This knight. So I need to remove it. I have 2 ways to remove it. I can either remove it by bishop or by rook. Look at that. That's what I did. And I'll tell you the reason why I didn't take it by bishop. It's because, realistically, logically speaking, forget what the engine says, forget what the computer says for the moment, because computers can see like 20 moves ahead. They know much more than I would in this position, but take a look at it right now. The bishop and the rook. I have these 2 pieces. One of them can give itself up for the knight, so I can play f4. Which piece out of my bishop and rook contributes currently, right now, at the moment, more towards my attack? Which piece? My bishop or my rook? Well, that's obviously going to be my bishop. My rook, it's a lovely piece. It's on a half-open file, but it doesn't directly attack the king. This bishop attacks a pawn in front of the king, so it's much more of a direct threat towards his king. Therefore, logically, I decided that this bishop is more beneficial to me to keep than this rook, so I would rather give up this rook. In my brain, I saw this rook as worth 5 points, and this bishop as worth 6 points, because look, it's in the center, it controls everything. I would never want to give up this piece, and also it contributes to an attack there, and the list goes on. So rook takes c3. In fact, what does the engine say about this? I think it would say it would be nasty to me. I think it would say bishop takes c3. Yes, it does. It is being unfair to me. It says bishop takes c3 is better. But that's simply because somewhere down the line, about 5 moves later, the engine sees a way to use this rook, right, for an attack. Alternatively, maybe the engine sees a way for black to win material or force a material win. So this rook would be beneficial in that situation where black has won material and gotten into an endgame. For example, if I press this. Okay, that's what the engine has just come up with, what is churned out. Let me go back a little bit. So it recommended bishop takes c3, b takes c3, b takes c3, f4, and bring the knight, pawn up. Oh, look. The bishop is attacked, right? Instead of taking the bishop, just protect this pawn. Allow it to move back and fork the rooks. This is insane. And then eventually, right, go forward a little bit. Look. You see this rook? Boom. Now it's in the attack. The engine saw that this rook can be used 10 moves in the future, right? That is the power of the chess engine. That's why when people say, oh, I cheated in chess, it's not really a big deal. No, it is a big deal. You don't know how powerful engines are. That's just, beginner talk. You know how it is. So yeah, that's why I went rook takes c3, because in my brain, the rook wasn't contributing to the attack as much as the bishop. But in a computer's brain, it can see 10 moves ahead. So it saw down the line that this rook would eventually contribute, and I gave you evidence. So anyway, rook takes c3, b takes c3. He has to take the rook. And finally, the move I've been banging on about for ages. Sorry about that. f4. I played f4. Attacking this square, allowing my pawn to go forward, allowing this to go forward. That diagonal is a weakness now. In fact, this pawn opened up a new diagonal over there, over here. So my queen can do some stuff there, maybe with my knight. There's too many options here. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So if we go to the sorry. Here, he went bishop to d4. His idea was to try and swap off as many pieces as possible. Hypothetically, if he could swap off all the minor pieces and the queens, he would be an exchange up in a winning endgame, if you visualize it like that. But was I going to allow him? Well, no. I played f3, king h2, and I took. Now I decided to... Listen, right? Earlier, I had said I kept this bishop in favor of that rook because this bishop contributed more to the attack. Here, I contradicted myself by giving up the same very bishop that I wanted to save. And well, that's just the brain of an 1800. You can't blame me. Anyway, it's because in this situation I was forced to exchange. I was kind of forced. What else can I do? He took by c pawn, maybe not by rook, because actually taking by rook should have been better because he can sacrifice here. Take by rook. Now I'd go knight f5. Oh, that makes sense now because this this move happens and the queen attacks this. So he went c takes d4, and I'm at knight f5 anyway. Queen f2, knight h6. Not the best move, I think, from the computer, according to the computer, but the idea is clear. I want to go there with one of my knights and fork the queen. For example, check. So there's a fork. If he moves his king, I'd take the queen. He can't move the queen because he's in check. If he takes the knight, then the exact same thing happens. My knight regenerates onto the same square, and then I win the queen. After I win the queen, it's game over pretty much. I would do something like this, and win, right? That was my idea. So he went queen to d2 in order to avoid this pattern. So e3, naturally. The idea of e3 is if he takes, then the exact same thing happens. the exact same thing happens, right? I can even feel cheeky and throw a little Latin if I wanted to. Probably don't need to though. So e3 and he went queen b4. After this, I think I have many ways to win, but the easiest way I found is just to take the queen, and he resigned here. Before we look at why he resigned, um, the engine, just to verify, it does say the option I played was the best one. It also recommends this type of move: check, takes, takes. Idea is if the king goes to g1, then he gets mated like this, right? And if the king goes to h1, then he gets mated anyway like this. So here he would be forced to move the king back somewhere, or actually to play king to h3. But that's very ugly since I just go. The engine says queen f6. If literally any queen move that doesn't lose the queen is winning. Okay, apart from that queen move, fine. Apart from that, this move is winning, for example, right? Um, but my option, the one I played, was the best one. The idea being, um, here he resigned, but if he had continued, he would do this. Then I just go e2. And what's this called again, guys? For those of you, below 1,000 rated, it's called a fork, where two pieces are attacked at the same time. Only one can move at a time, and the other one is taken. So he would move one of his rooks. I would take the other rook. Um, and why is chess.com glitching? By the way, have you heard of the server crashes taking place on chess.com because of the user base, the player base, sorry, growing extremely quickly since December, literally doubled. Um, Maybe that contributes to it, but anyway, knight e4 is what I'd do, protecting this, and he is finished. The only source of counterplay he has is these doubled, isolated, but passed pawns, and his bishop, which is doing nothing. All I would need to do is put my rook there, bring my king here, here, sorry, rook there, uh, bring the king here, 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 blockade the pawn, and use my knights. Put them there, try and shepherd my pawn using my knights, chase the rook away, promote the pawn, take, uh, uh, exchange the pawn for the rook, and win the rest of the game. That's what I would do. So that's why I was winning. Despite a dodgy opening, I managed to pull through and win. Yes, he has one pawn for the piece, but it's not enough. So I hope you thoroughly enjoyed that game. Um, I did enjoy playing the game. It was a nice win. Maybe the opening was janky, but after Queen d6, everything was good. I went here, started my attack, found this insane exchange sacrifice, which I was proud of. Got my knights in, and here he resigned because of that. All right. I hope to see you in the next video. In fact, before you do so, let me just check my channel. Um, that's me, 117 subscribers. Thanks for those of you who have subscribed. If you haven't, then you know what to do. Um, how many videos do I have? Probably about 66, 67. Shorts, I have like 2, I think. Yes, that's me back in the day. Alright, well, see you all. I hope you have a good day, and say hello to me in the comment section.